commission is a mechanism of the executive branch of the government to inquire into and report on some matter of significant public concern. Commissions of inquiry, or public inquiries, are most often authorized under federal or provincial inquiries acts. Inquiries are ad hoc, created as needed in response to some significant event. Inquiries typically have an investigative stage in which the Commission hears testimony from witnesses, then a policy stage in which the Commission has discussions with policy experts, ending in publication of a final report, often containing recommendations. The Public Order Emergency Commission is organized in response to the invocation of an Emergency Act on February 14, 2022. Pursuant to the provisions of the Emergency Act, the government is required within 60 days after the expiration or revocation of a declaration of emergency to hold an inquiry into the circumstances that led to the declaration of an emergency and the measures taken for dealing with the emergency. Ontario Court of Appeal Justice Paul Rouleau was selected to lead the commission. Over the course of 6 weeks, the commission will hear from 65 witnesses, including members of law enforcement, government officials, including Omar Alghabra, the Federal Minister of Transport, and Prime Minister Trudeau, as well as protesters and community members. Justice Rouleau is expected to publish his report in February 2023.
Public inquiries are not legal proceedings and do not result in criminal or civil liability. However, the Commission can make recommendations about the subject under review. The recommendations are published in the Commission's report and are not binding on government, but can lead to changes in law or policy. The Commission's report must be put before Parliament within 360 days after the declaration or revocation of the emergency. Though inquiries are not legal proceedings per se, they typically use evidentiary court-like hearings with witnesses questioned by lawyers to gather and test information. The aim of public inquiries is broad: to promote transparency and accountability with respect to matters of enduring significance to the public. They provide an opportunity for people who were directly involved to tell their stories, to shed light on the events that, in this case, led to the declaration of the public order emergency.
The Commission has granted TDF standing to participate in the public order emergency inquiry. TDF wants to know the real reason why the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act. TDF will hold the federal government accountable by cross-examining witnesses and making submissions about the protests and the government's response to the protests to demonstrate the government's overreach, violation of charter rights, and improper declaration of a public order emergency. This is important because under the Emergencies Act, the government can only declare a public order emergency if it has reasonable grounds to believe a public order emergency exists. This involves a reasonable belief that there is an urgent and critical situation of a temporary nature that either A, seriously endangers the lives, health, or safety of Canadians, and is of such proportions or nature as to exceed the capacity or authority of a province to deal with it, or B, threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada, and that cannot effectively be dealt with under any other law in Canada. As a result of the high legal threshold for invoking a public order emergency, TDF will concentrate on adducing evidence and examining witnesses to show that the government lacked the legal basis for invoking the Emergencies Act.
There is a long history of public inquiries in Canada. Public inquiries, previously known as royal commissions, led to things like the passage of the Act of Union establishing a single province of Canada. In that case, the inquiry was conducted by the Governor-General, Lord Durham, who had a specific mandate to make constitutional recommendations following the Mackenzie-Papineau rebellions of 1837. Since then, there have been over 500 public inquiries in Canada, including the 1985 bombing of Air India Flight 182, the contamination of the national blood supply in the 1970s and 1980s, the Mackenzie Valley Pipeline Inquiry, and most recently, and perhaps the most well-known, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And now, of course, the inquiry into the use of the Emergencies Act in response to the truckers' demonstrations and protests earlier this year.
Public inquiries are major instruments of accountability within the justice system and for our country more generally, but they also raise some interesting epistemological and ethical questions. Like, what is it we do when we testify to something? And what reasons do we have for believing what someone tells us? How do we know that what they say is true? And why does that matter? There are really two different types of testimony that vary in terms of rigor and expectations of truth and significance. There is informal, what we call informal or natural testimony, which is what we do when someone asks us for directions, for example. We tell them, but not terribly much hangs on it in the normal situation, and it's not a matter of great significance. Public inquiries, on the other hand, involve testimony in a much more formal sense. When we testify at an inquiry or in court, we make a solemn commitment to speak truthfully about things that matter. We testify in order to get at the truth, to share knowledge, to honestly help each other decide what to believe. And there is a higher than average expectation of truth for that reason, since the things testified to often involve significant harm and are matters of great significance. They might actually change how we do things, how we make policies or laws going forward. So when we hear witnesses at the Public Order Emergency Commission testify to things like the fear of police brutality on the streets or to the downtown core being blocked in Ottawa, we're interested not just in the truth of those claims, but in their significance, how they impacted people's lives. So while it is essential that witnesses tell the truth, it is perhaps even more important that the Commission gives those testifying the opportunity to tell their stories about why it was so significant that an emergency order was declared at all. The Democracy Fund relies on the generous support of our donors to preserve and protect the constitutional rights and the civil liberties of Canadians. TDF will, at various times, have up to 3 lawyers in Ottawa for the duration of the public inquiry. I'll be offering daily insights and summaries, which you can find on our website. TDF will need your support to continue doing this work. Please consider making a tax-deductible donation today to help continue our very important work. You can find the link below.